Hello and welcome to today's training. If you're a defense contractor, defense investor, or a service provider to defense contractors, you're in the right place. My name is Greg Tomczyk, CEO here at Valor Cybersecurity. Extremely excited about today's session. We've had about 4 over the past month on different topics as it relates to what I believe is the biggest cybersecurity initiative in the U.S. government's history, something called CMMC. If you're a defense contractor, you're probably familiar with it. And if you're joining this session just getting an understanding of what CMMC is at the end of the day, we're going to go ahead and dive in to some of those specifics as a refresher. For those of you that already know what it is, we're going to breeze past that to get you right to the action plan that we believe is going to help you save time, money, resources, and effort when it comes to getting to that 110 SPRS score or getting to that certification assessment to set yourself up to continue to win contracts, continue to serve the Department of Defense and the national security mission. It's extremely important to us here at Valor Cybersecurity that you continue to serve that mission and that we lower as many barriers as humanly possible to make sure you stay continuing to contribute to that great mission when it comes to serving our country. I know it's important to you, it's important to us, and we want to make sure that there's no frustration and confusion when it comes to this topic and these requirements. So today we're going to be talking about really aligning your business with these requirements. And in order to align your business, as we know, as business owners, business leaders, you have to set a standard, just like you have for HR, for financials, for operations, for putting bids in for contracts. You have a standard that you've set across many departments within your business, but we find most defense contractors have not set a cybersecurity standard because it's often overcomplicated, overcomplex, and the people describing it in the ecosystem are still using acronyms and government language to describe a lot of this. And we're on a mission to help you simplify upfront, which is going to help you gain awareness, and then standardize cybersecurity so you can use it as your biggest competitive advantage. We see it as a upcoming and current contract requirement. Right now, you may not lose contracts because of cybersecurity, but there are businesses that are now realizing that not doing it up to this point is putting them at a disadvantage in the market. And going forward into 2025, we're looking at Q2, Q3. These SPRS scores that you're submitting are going to be a part of the vetting mechanism to actually award the contract to the right firm that's going to go ahead and deliver those mission critical products or services. So if you haven't already, please scan our pre-session questionnaire. When you scan that questionnaire and provide just a few responses on where you're coming from when it comes to CMMC or cybersecurity, it's going to allow us to bring better content to these trainings each week. And as a part of that, we're going to give you a free bonus, which is our CMMC compliance formula. It's everything we've learned really since 2017 when it came to DFARS 7012. But since 2019, when CMMC came to fruition, we've learned a lot over the past 6.5 years when it comes to what the contracting officers, what the prime contractors, and ultimately what the entire ecosystem wants you to actually do as a business. There's a lot of confusion out there. This compliance formula resource really provides the step-by-step guide in order to get you from where you're at to that full compliance in the shape that best fits your business. And I think that's most important. There's no one size fits all for this. It's really going to be up to how your business serves the government, in what capacity, and then you got to make some strategic decisions within your company to have that ideal go forward strategy. That's what we help most of our clients with, whether they've already had a plan in place or they're trying to get a plan in place to make sense of that path forward. And we've been able to kind of see where people have made missteps, and we're going to talk about some of those missteps because I'm a firm believer as both a person and a business owner that sometimes to understand what we need to do, we need to understand what not to do. We're going to talk about that here shortly. So please go ahead and scan that pre-session questionnaire if you haven't already. And as a part of filling in those responses, we're going to give you a free bonus once you submit that. That's going to help you have a better plan forward. So what are we going to go over today? This is what I look at as a strategy session. There's a lot of sessions going on in the CMMC ecosystem when it comes to CMMC, and a lot of them are more information awareness. They're not necessarily business strategy sessions. So we're going to make this extremely strategic and make sure that you walk away with some tangible actions that are going to leave you better off by spending some time with us this afternoon. So we're going to go through, why does cybersecurity really matter at the end of the day? We're going to briefly go into some ideal starting points, some of the mindsets and roadblocks that we commonly come across when we're working with companies, working with executives to implement CMMC into their business. What should your action plan look like? And then ultimately, we'll make sure to have about 5 to 10 minutes at the end of the session, which you can drop your questions in the chat and we'll get to those first, to answer your biggest questions. We get questions over and over again, the same common questions, but if you have a question specific to your business, we want to spend this time to answer those for you. So one of the ways we like to start is just a little bit of interaction. We love to interact with the defense contractor community, the defense industrial base, the service providers in the ecosystem, because at Valor Cybersecurity, we're all about supply chain security. So we want to understand where you're coming to this session from a mindset standpoint. Where do you feel like you are on a cybersecurity scale of 1 being no idea what cybersecurity is to 3 being expert? We commonly get people that are in a 1 or a 2. There are some experts in cybersecurity that may not understand CMMC, and we can help supplement some of that expertise. So please go ahead and submit that either in the comments on YouTube or LinkedIn, or you can drop it in any of the chat, whichever platform you're on. It helps us to understand where you're coming from a mindset standpoint as it relates to cybersecurity. A lot of people, I'd say 80 to 85% of people really still don't understand cybersecurity. They understand the word, but what it actually means, implement it, and what that feeling feels like when you actually have it in place and feel more secure and more protected. So why am I here? Early on in my career, I was a cyber attack victim. Went and played some professional baseball. And when I got out, I asked myself, what was the most painful thing that I went through that uniquely qualifies me to serve the world? And it was really cybersecurity, and a way to help people both simplify and standardize cybersecurity. Both of my parents were in the United States military. The defense community is extremely important to me. It's where I grew up. It's who raised me when I look back. And I wanted to take all of the expertise I got in the cybersecurity field, learning from some of the best CEOs of cybersecurity companies, as well as chief information security officers, to bring that to the defense community. This was well before CMMC came about, really to ensure that those defense contractors and their partners are protected and mission ready to continue to deliver those incredible products or services to the U.S. government. I believe that each firm that we help protect and ensure mission readiness, we are elevating our national security with each of those conversations and engagements. And that's ultimately why I'm here, why Valor Cybersecurity was started, and why we put on these trainings each week is to really help you as a defense contractor or a defense contracting partner to make sure you're protected, make sure you're protecting your supply chain and the people that contribute to your business, which is overall going to contribute to mission readiness for what we look at as the warfighter, or the person that's going to war on behalf of our country, to make sure we're protected, make sure our homeland is protected. So that's why I'm here at the end of the day. Very simple mission. Early on in this conversation, I talked about cybersecurity standards. We all have standards in our lives, in our businesses, when it comes to human resources, financial operations, the way we put together proposals and contracts. But most companies still don't have a cybersecurity standard. A cybersecurity standard is not the same as an IT standard. It's not how you run machines. It's how you protect your people, your systems, and the information you process. CMMC for defense contractors, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, is really the first ecosystem supply chain level certification model outside of FedRAMP and some of the other ones that are targeted at protecting both people, systems, and information. It's mainly around information that goes into systems that people interact with. So it's really that supply chain of information that the nation values from a defense standpoint. And in order to protect it in the most effective and efficient way, you have to set a cybersecurity standard that works for your business to meet the contract requirements to continue to do business with those parties. And that's ultimately why we talk about cybersecurity standards so much, because it becomes something tangible that you can use as a competitive advantage. If you're just implementing one-off security implementations and there's no really framework or standard behind it, you're basically dumping money into a bucket and security becomes really a cost center. And we want to see people standardize so they can start to prove to both the Department of Defense, prime contractors, partners, anybody that they do business with, that you have a standard that's set, everybody understands it, you have a playbook, everybody's running that playbook, you're able to talk about it with your customers. And we've seen companies win multi-million-dollar and even $100 million contracts because they leverage the cybersecurity standard they've set consciously. So it's extremely important to understand why a cybersecurity standard is so important and how it differs from just the common one-size-fits-all approach to implementing just the controls in a one-off format and not actually having something that you can explain why you're doing it and exactly what you're doing and proving it to those people that matter most. So what are the stakes around CMMC? There's a lot of confusion out there. There's a lot of government memos being submitted. There are a lot of professionals out there and lawyers that overcomplicate CMMC. It sounds like another acronym the government's put out. It's ultimately a cybersecurity certification model. It shows that they have different levels of information that they give to vendors, to service providers, and they're saying, based off of what we give you, you are a specific level based off of that sensitivity. Low sensitivity, which is called federal contract information, is level 1, all the way up to the biggest and most impactful technologies that are being produced out of government contractors. That would be a level 2 or 3. So it goes from 1, low maturity, to 3 being the most mature, the expert level as they call it, and it's an advancement model. We encourage each company to start at 1 and then increase to 2 if 2 is a requirement. And if you don't know where you stand in that equation, feel free to reach out, fill out our questionnaire, ask that question to us. Where do you think we stand based off of delivering this service and receiving this type of information? That's why we exist, to answer those types of questions, because that's going to allow you to take more targeted action. And ultimately, that's why Valor exists. We're an action-oriented company. Obviously, we can have conversations, but it's always going to be about how you can take that next best step forward to both protect your business and stay compliant. This is a mandatory requirement up to this point. If you have DFAR 7012, 7019, or 7020, you have had to submit your SPRS score up to this point. If you haven't done that, I highly recommend looking into it. We have guides on how to go about doing that free of charge. If you haven't submitted it, you're probably losing contracts because it's not in the system. Maybe they're not even letting you know because your competitors have already submitted that SPRS score and they're basically just giving the contract to somebody else because they've done what they've been signing and saying that they're supposed to do. So it's a mandatory requirement. In Q2 of this year, Q3, they are looking to make this a go, no-go requirement, a prerequisite of winning a contract, having this in place. The SPRS score right now, eventually it'll be actually getting a certification. Some of the common frustrations, there's a lot of frustration and confusion when it comes to CMMC and setting a cybersecurity standard. A lot of people say there's too many rules doing business with the US government. It's too expensive. Where do I even start? These are common frustrations we hear from, I'd say 90-95% of clients when they first come to us. If you're going to do business in a regulated industry, whether it's with the US government, with the Department of Defense, with healthcare systems, there's going to be rules and requirements as a part of doing that business. And when it comes to the too expensive equation, you have to kind of flip the coin on it. Is in order to do business with this ecosystem, this supply chain, how much money are we earning as a part of doing business with them? What percentage of that money needs to go to requirements? Oftentimes, you will make more money as a part of contracts in order to align with their requirements because they want those requirements met. So I think about a company that we were recently working with, and they were making about $10 million a year from the Department of Defense contracts. And in order to get up to speed with the full requirements from all the DFARs, it was about 200 grand a year. So they were making 10 million to spend 200 grand. That's a pretty big trade-off. 200 grand sounds very expensive, but if you think about it, that's one or two full-time roles on that contract. And If you ask the contracting officer, we feel that these security requirements are too expensive, they will most likely make that rationalization to you. Say you're only making $200,000 a year from defense contracts and they're requiring you to have $200,000 worth of requirement costs. That doesn't make sense from a business standpoint. So you have to flip it on its head is how much are we making from doing business with this individual or supply chain and processing this information? Most of the time it far outweighs the actual cost of the requirements intentionally. There's been people who have crunched these numbers to say in order to earn $1 million, you need to spend $10,000 on these requirements. Those are rough numbers, but you have to look at it like that. And where do I even start? The starting point is always the most important. I feel like the first step is always the hardest. And we help companies each and every day take that first step. And that's ultimately what we specialize in is what is your best first step and next step. We don't do a lot of the technical work. We'll make sure either you have a partner or we can help you find a partner for a lot of the technical work, but it's helping guide you through the process so you save time and money, you have a clear budget, you have the right documentation and standards in place to prove your compliance. And I feel like that is where a lot of companies need to start. If you're far along in the process, then you may not need somebody like us. But if you're really looking to find a place to start, you're looking to get clarity on that next step, you're looking to go from 90 to 110, you want to understand where to spend money, that is where a readiness partner like Valor Cybersecurity comes into play. And we'd love and be happy to help you in that next step. This is based off the NIST 800-171 framework. If you're in the defense contracting space, you've probably heard of NIST. NIST is a governance body, an organization that sets cybersecurity standards for a variety of supply chains. 800-171 is specific to non-federal systems, so government contractors, companies doing business with the U.S. government. And as we mentioned, you have level 1, 2, and 3. Most companies today only need to be up to level 1 or 2. We see about half to 3/4 of companies need to be level 2, and then you have lower level contractors that need to be level 1. I would not encourage you to go to level 3 unless you've already surpassed level 2. We do see some companies in our ecosystem and some of our customers that are planning and looking forward to level 3 just to use it as a competitive advantage. But there's no reason to think about level 3 if you haven't gotten past level 1. So what are some of the changes and requirements? I just want to briefly go over this because it's important to look in your contracts before you bid on them. Potentially, but the ones you have actively as well as renewals, because these are changing within the contracts. You had 7012 come about in 2017. You had 7019 come into play in 2019, and then you had 7020. I think that was 2024, around mid 2024, where they want to now not just see your SPRS score. They want to now see that you have the documentation, the system security plans, and they want to make sure that every questionnaire that they send you, you're saying we've aligned our business with the security requirements, the 320 objectives in NIST 800-171, and you could be subject to a DoD assessment. Most of the time in those questionnaires, they ask if you align with it and have you done a DoD assessment. Many people say no to the assessment, but they say, yes, we've aligned with it. And that triggers the Department of Defense to say this company is accessible in the future. And what they're going to do, maybe it's upon a renewal or it's mid-contract when that contract is being reviewed, is they will send you a note, maybe an email, a letter saying within the next 90 to 120 days, we would like X company to do a C3PAO assessment. Those C3PAO assessments can be really anywhere from 10,000 to 80,000. That's a wide range. But the market right now is all over the place when it comes to those assessments because this is just the beginning. Eventually, those prices will, really be bucketed into, different effort levels of the audit. We have partners now that are specifically focused on auditing small to medium-sized businesses, and their pricing is recognized in that fashion, or their pricing is appropriate, really on the lower end for those specific companies because they know a small business may not pay 80 grand for an assessment at this time. So you have to look for the right partners. You have to ask the right questions to get those answers. But here are the exact contract requirements you need to look for in your contracts to make sure you're making an informed business decision by accepting them. So what is the ideal starting point? If you are just starting out in your journey, we recommend really staying simple. The essential security hygiene. We take all of our clients on this maturity journey because it brings it all together and it builds on each other. So if you start really with the essential security hygiene, what every business should really start with, whether they're a startup or a company that's just going down the cybersecurity avenue, you can go from there to the NIST cybersecurity framework, and then go to NIST 800-171. NIST 800-171 has 17 control areas, everything from access control to training and awareness to data privacy to making sure you're monitoring systems. It's pretty in-depth. There's about 320 objectives within those different areas. So there's a lot of objectives you need to meet. It's a hefty lift from a business standpoint to get started, but there are ways to get the biggest bang for each dollar spent. And that's why we always start our engagements with a scoping discussion and then a clear budget to make sure we're covering all of those 320 objectives with the dollars to be spent most effectively and most efficiently. That's so important. We've seen companies spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and then come to us and say, we never had a budget, we were just spending one-off, and we really have to kind of re-scramble the puzzle and the picture to make sure that they're actually spending each dollar wisely as a business. And that's really why we're in the ecosystem, is to help people to use our knowledge of people taking their missteps and make sure that you don't take that specific misstep. So what are the biggest roadblocks to get to 110? Everybody's goal, if you're in that level 2 and you process CUI, is 110 SPRS score. A lot of it starts with simply confusion over the requirements, too many moving parts. Ultimately, you have to simplify the process. That's why our mission is so focused on that simplicity, that simplification and standardization. When you have a standard, it simplifies how you look at something that has a bunch of moving parts and is really confusing to start, but really becomes a point of clarity in your business that you can use as a competitive advantage. We're extremely passionate about that. Lack of internal buy-in. We commonly get brought in because the leaders of the organization or ownership do not understand the impact of these requirements doing business with the U.S. government. Maybe they're winning, hundreds of millions of dollars in contracts. They don't want to spend the extra dollars. So they're going to have pushback until they get the right messaging on why they need to take action. So these leaders don't prioritize compliance. You really have to show them the business impact. If we do not do this, we lose this $2 million contract because people are losing contracts in our ecosystem. Our prime contractors are sending us questionnaires. If we do not answer these questions in the right format, we may lose the contract. I know for me, when I'm in a room with the leader and I feel the shift in their energy when they hear that, they're basically immediately into action mode. How do we take action? How do we save money? How do we have the right budget? How do we make this happen with the least amount of effort, least amount of money possible? And that comes down to some of the efficiencies we've found. Poor SPRS score management. The SPRS score right now is really the key metric that the Department of Defense is going to measure you on when it comes to cybersecurity. We saw a lot of companies between 2019 and 2025 guess on their SPRS score. Maybe they put a 110 and they didn't have the documentation or really the full improvements. Maybe they asked their IT company and their IT company said, yep, we're good to go. And they weren't good to go. And what happens now is you go in and enter a SPRS score that's lower, and that gets flagged as a potential false claim, which could result in legal action, and we don't want to see that happen. So make sure that SPRS score is something that you focus on as an organization. Put it on, your key information within your company. What is our SPRS score? This is a part of either IT governance or how you secure your business. That SPRS score number is a key metric to continue to win business with the Department of Defense. And if your business depends on the Department of Defense, that metric is really going to keep you in the game and keep you winning contracts going forward. And if you can show that you're continually improving that, it becomes a competitive advantage going forward. So these are the biggest roadblocks to that end goal, that outcome that we all want to get to. But you have to do the right inputs, and that's why we tease these out and come up with clear solutions to really jump right over those roadblocks. So we always close out these trainings with the fast track action plan. There is no easy button or quick fix. Nobody here is promising you if you go with us or you listen to this webinar, within 60 days, you're going to become 100% compliant. If somebody promises you that, please run the other direction. Typically, this process takes between 6, 9, 12 months. 6 months is extremely aggressive. If a company says we have an unlimited budget, we're ready to go, 6 months is really a full-time job for multiple people. We typically see companies roadmap this out for about 12, 16 months. And that gives them the time frame to implement, to budget for it, to make sure they're winning contracts and using some of those dollars to put towards getting ready for CMMC. So if you haven't gotten started yet, I would recommend, not saying start yesterday, but get started in a small step forward by knowing your starting point, understanding how to calculate your accurate current state SPRS score. The business changes continuously, so we want to make sure you have that SPRS score first and foremost. That's really the starting point. Self-assessment mistakes that get companies in trouble is simply looking at the assessment guide and going through and just checking yes or no. You have to make sure you have evidence for this. So if you can't check it with confidence, if you second guess yourself, do we have that monitoring tool? Is somebody looking at it? Have we done training in the last year that's specific to controlled unclassified information? If you're second guessing yourself, make sure you put a star next to it or a no, because it's really implemented or not implemented. If it's not fully implemented, it's a no. So you should not recognize that value of the score. We want to make sure everybody has an accurate SPRS score, and that's going to allow you to take targeted action going forward. Close your compliance gaps. We recommend looking at which of your compliance gaps, once you can put them on a plan of action and milestones, of all the ones that you're not confident in saying yes in. I think about, being in a court case and you're on the stand and somebody's asking you, all 110 of these questions or all 320 objectives, and you have sworn to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. And that's how you should feel about this, because that is how the government is going to look at it, because they feel like they've been defrauded over the past 5, 6, 7 years, because companies have been saying, yep, we're 110 compliant, we're good to go, we've been protecting your information, but we're still leaking it to the enemy at the end of the day, to the adversary. And they're spending millions of dollars to pay you to deliver a service, and you're signing to say we're doing something, and they're finding that there are many contractors out there that have not been doing it. And those are the biggest mistakes, is being too generous with saying yes, fully implemented, when you know something may not be implemented. We don't want to see you get caught in that stance. It's really painful. It's not going to feel great. You're going to lose money. You're going to lose the reputation, and you're probably going to get that bad mark when it comes to those contract approvals, and it's going to put you behind the curve when it comes to winning contracts. When it comes to closing your compliance gaps, you have to prioritize those high impact security improvements. They've made it easy. They've made those items maybe a 5 value when it comes to your SPRS score. When you work with a readiness partner like us, they should put the specific milestone or initiative under that. For example, multi-factor. Maybe that accomplishes 30 points from a positive standpoint when implemented. You should be able to stack them in those formats to be able to spend dollars on the ones that impact your score most. Access controls, for example, or having monitoring that logs your activity, being able to respond to an incident, the right documentation, making sure your email is secure. These are going to be the biggest bang for each dollar. Those are those high impact security improvements. And you really want to start there, but you have to understand your starting point in order to understand, where you're at, what those gaps are, what are going to be those most high impact security improvements going forward. Budget-friendly strategies for small businesses. There's all types of grant programs out there in order to help you to be able to spend dollars on actually meeting these requirements. There are also great tools out there like Prevail or other types of tools that are targeted at small to medium-sized businesses to help them contain, some people call it an enclave, the information that is being communicated from the US government. And there's a lot of budget-friendly strategies out there, but you have to seek them out. You have to ask those right questions to get them. We have all those resources in our CMMC compliance formula ebook, which is free as a part of joining this session. And we want to make sure you have access to those budget-friendly strategies and the budget-friendly vendors out there that are going after small to medium-sized companies. If you're a small company under 100 people and you are out there going for somebody that's serving a Lockheed Martin and paying those prices, you're probably not going to get the solution that fits best for you. So you have to look for that right-sized service provider, service partner that's going to give you what you need at the price that it may not be comfortable up front, but the price that's appropriate to your business. Documentation and proof. I talk about this a lot, and it's one of the biggest things that it comes down to when setting a cybersecurity standard is being able to prove that you're actually doing what you say. We see a lot of people, they get on the stand, they're on phone calls with contract officers or prime contractors. They're answering questionnaires with, all of the things that make them feel good, all of the yeses, and saying, we do have this, we've been doing it for the past 5 years. But when it comes down to proving it, this documentation, the policies, the security plans, the training is really what it all comes down to. It doesn't matter what you say when you're getting audited. They're not asking you, are you doing this? And you say yes. And they're like, okay, you're good to go. They're looking at how you're actually doing it. And can you prove it to them through documentation, through evidence, through screenshots? They're really going to look at you proving that you're actually doing it, not just saying it. That is where the rubber meets the road for CMMC, is when people have to actually prove it. We've seen multiple companies that have come to us because the government, the contracting officer, the prime contractor has asked, we see your SPRS score, please send us your system security plan. And when they see that, their heart drops into their stomach. Oh, we don't have a system security plan. We have a SPRS score. We use some type of self-assessment tool, maybe Avanta or one of those tools out there that calculate your SPRS score, and they don't have a system security plan. So they're scrambling. They need immediate service, emergency service to spin up a system security plan in a week. Typically it takes, a couple weeks to get that together. And it really is a bad feeling for their leadership. So make sure you have that up front. It's not difficult to develop that documentation. If you take some time, it's going to be well worth kind of proving what you're doing before that question comes up. Maintaining compliance without stress. Compliance is very stressful for a lot of business owners. That's why we ultimately exist in this ecosystem, is to help lower that stress and take some of that off of the plate of the operational team. Really performing that self-audit before a see-through PAO or a DoD review, so there are no surprises. We call it a mock audit. We do that for all of our clients, where we'll prepare them, we'll help them prove what they're doing, and we'll do a mock audit where we actually go ask them the questions that a see-through PAO or an auditor is going to ask. And that really minimizes a lot of the stress because they've already gone through the exercise. I think about, as a professional baseball pitcher, all the preparation I did up to that point before I got on the mound in the game, that made the experience so much less stressful because I knew I was prepared. And it's the same in this vein and this activity. Compliance is not a one-time project. We have a lot of companies out there that talk about compliance as a one-time project. It is an ongoing initiative, so it needs to be managed by somebody. Even if it's you as the CEO, you have to get your company to that 110 or up to that level 1, whichever one is appropriate for your company, and you have to continue to maintain it. We recommend kind of a monthly drumbeat to keep things on track as the business changes, as you get new contracts and operations evolve, and make sure you kind of have that drumbeat, that cadence, that cultural activity to make sure it stays up to date and ongoing. So when you get asked about it, it's up to date and doesn't have to be urgently updated. The simple way to stay ahead of evolving regulations. There are simple ways. There's a lot of information online, as we know. There's a lot of people asking, different questions on LinkedIn and online. The most simple way to stay up to date is to really look at your contracts of how these are evolving. We put on these trainings each and every week to make sure you stay up to date with what's going on in the CMMC ecosystem. Recently, Katie Arrington got brought back on as the lead when it comes to CMMC, which is extremely exciting because she started this initiative. They put out a memo that breaks out level 2 into 2 levels, which is 1 is going to be self-assessment and kind of having that SPRS score. And then if you have that more advanced information, then you're going to be actually participating in the C3 PAO initial wave that comes out. And those are going to be requests you're going to get via email in your contracts or from your contracting officer. So these are really the 4 key steps that every company should take going forward, whether you're at 100 trying to get to 110, or you're at 0 really trying to just get to 1 to 10 to 20 to 100 to 110 eventually. These are the steps we see companies often fumble with. Maybe they start to close compliance gaps before really understanding what their starting point is, or they start spinning up a bunch of documentation before they've closed the gap. So they're basically documenting everything, saying we've implemented everything, we have template responses, and then it comes up where somebody comes knocking on the door or requests it, and they're really caught in a very unfortunate situation. So this is our action plan for you. This is what we take all of our clients through. Obviously, there's more details below it, but if you have any questions on this and how it can be tailored to you, definitely feel free to reach out directly. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, whether on LinkedIn or on YouTube. As a part of coming to this training, we're going to give you our free CMMC compliance formula ebook free of charge. It's really the step-by-step process that goes a little bit more into detail than we went through today on today's training. And if you want to know where you stand, you can go ahead and take our pre-assessment. We put that together free of charge. This is what I wish I had as a business early on. Before I had my cyber attack, if somebody just gave me a simple QR code that took me to a link that I could fill out 10 questions, and it would give me kind of here's where you stand, here's what you need to work on, free of charge. This is what some companies charge, 20 to 30 grand, that kind of gap assessment in order to get companies in a stance where they know what action to take. This is the ideal first step in the ecosystem. We've heard it from many of our clients. We've seen people come into the pre-assessment ecosystem, and it really helps minimize a lot of the confusion and frustration that we continue to see in the ecosystem. And I'd love for you to be able to take that pre-assessment, and we'll go ahead and review it, give you some quick actions that you should take based off the size of your business. And yeah, we'd love to see you take that pre-assessment. And that's our gift to you for taking some time to join us. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. This is our email to our team. It'll be distributed across the organization, so we'll make sure you get an answer. If you want to give us a call, that's our direct line. You can give us a call, ask your questions, let us know what your biggest struggles are. And even if you're not looking for a readiness partner, we can help use our ecosystem maybe to source an IT company for you, or you're ready for a C3PAO audit. We have many partners in the ecosystem. We've been able to form what we call really an alliance of partners to make sure every client that comes in our door walks out with more confidence, whether they're at a 110 or they just have a plan to get to that 110 that they can execute as budget allows. So really excited for what's to come. Obviously, these requirements can create some pressure, but there's companies like Valor Cybersecurity out there that are here to help you and in it for the right reasons. So we'd love to continue the conversation. Please make sure to like or subscribe if you're on YouTube. We would love to hear from you, and make sure to check out next week's training as we continue to take information from our ecosystem, put it out there free of charge for your benefit. So until next time, my name is Greg Tomczyk. Have a great day ahead, and we'll be back soon.